Mackenzie. Hey, this is Owen. Don't forget to like our show and subscribe.
This podcast is brought to you by the Love and Kindness Project Foundation. What is one thing that you could do to think, speak, or act kindly today? Go to loveandkindnessproject.org to learn more. Before we begin this podcast, if you or someone you know is in crisis or needs emotional support, there are tools that can help. So get yourself a pen and paper or open a note-taking app on your phone or computer. Feel free to pause this episode while you get yourself ready. The episode starts at 1 minute and 6 seconds. You can call Talk Suicide Canada at 1-833-456-4566. You can text 45645, which is coming in the fall of 2023. In Canada, you can also call 988, the Kids Help Phone at 1-800-668-6868. The Trans Lifeline in Canada is 1-877-330-6366. And in the United States, 1-877-565-8860. Or call 911. You are not alone, and you do not have to be alone. I would like to honor and recognize the traditional and unceded territories of the Katzie, Kwantlen, and Semiahmoo nations on whose territory I live, work, and play. Welcome to We Are the ADHD Family Podcast. This podcast is meant to chronicle our journey with ADHD, autism, and other discoveries along the way. I reach out to advocates, experts, individuals, and other families that want to raise their voices and empower those on their journey. My name is Mark Smeets, and I am passionate about removing barriers for others through creating connections and building on strengths and practical problem solving. I am married to Siobhan, a parent to 2 wonderful kids, and all of us have ADHD. I want you to feel like you have power and hope. And now, into the episode. So the other week I came downstairs and I'd asked the kids to get ready. So I yell from upstairs and I say, "Hey, are you guys dressed?" And both the kids answer yes. Fantastic. So come downstairs and I notice that Owen's in his underwear. He's got socks in his hands and he has no other clothes. And I don't know how he thought, he just turns to me and he goes, "But I have socks on." Like, they're on your hands, son. This is not dressed. Welcome to a new episode of We Are the ADHD Family and the Advocateurs. Well, in the previous episode, I was talking about the reaction that I received my wife and I received when we tell people, "Hey, our son's autistic," or "I have ADHD," whether it's to friends, families, other people that come along, just that reaction. And quite honestly, I'm stunned by the range of responses that I received, or that we've received rather. And I didn't understand why until some self-reflection later on, and now I understand why I was hurt. People just don't know how awesome both of our kids are. And so in that episode, I shared some stories of just some of the amazing things that we've been able to do with my son, with our son, and with our daughter, just not having the pressure to be that rock star or rocket scientist or the president of something or other, that she is free to be who she is. One thing that I don't think people understand is that a diagnosis really is the key required to get any sort of help or assistance. I think there needs to be a bit of a reworking on that phrasing, but it's not just to get any help or assistance. It's really about helping us build our kids to be the amazing people that they can be. And I think as parents, we see that, disability or no disability. But these things get viewed as a label. And again, I believe I referenced the scarlet letter hanging around somebody's neck. And that's not the case with this. So in this episode, I decided to reach out to other parents, and I wanted to ask them basically 7 questions about their experience to see, were there any similarities, differences, how they felt, what they did to react when they found themselves in such similar situations than my wife and I did. I am very grateful that my 3 guests were willing to share their experiences and be so open. All of us hope that you don't feel alone when it happens to you, and that you can respond in a strengths-based and kind way to educate somebody, and you can show them how amazing your kids are. Let's get into the guests and hear their story. And I'd like to welcome Mary to the episode of We Are the ADHD Family. And Mary, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me. I have a 9-year-old son that has autism and ADHD, and he also has a diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder. I'm home a lot. I'm self-employed, so my schedule's somewhat flexible. So it makes it easy, like, running him around to wherever he needs to go.
When you've told somebody that your child has a disability, do you use the specific terminology, or you just say disability, or does it depend on the situation?
I think my general preference has always been to use the specific terminology, which in our case is to say that my child has ADHD and autism. More kids are getting diagnosed these days, so people are becoming aware of the terminology, but they may not know what it really means. When people are observing my son's behavior, he usually looks really hyperactive and quite often doing negative things. So people will think he's a bad kid and that we're bad parents. So I think it's important to try and educate the people you're talking to. Sometimes I'll mention that he has high functioning autism, especially when I'm signing him up for things like extracurriculars. And I do this because I feel like the terminology kind of lets the person know that his symptoms are less severe from a cognitive delay standpoint and more to do with his behaviors.
See, and that's interesting because I was told the other week about my son, where the person, he just goes, "Oh, your son must be high functioning." I'm like, "What? No, like, you can't, that's not what you say to somebody." But that's its own story. But like, high functioning it was removed from the DSM eons ago for the fact that it just didn't really paint the picture. It's like, if you're autistic, you're autistic. But I think the point that you're bringing up is that you get that stereotype of what somebody is. And if you were to look at something like hand flapping, that kind of self-regulation piece, it's not hurting anybody. Or those kind of things that stim, the stims that some people do, that doesn't hurt anybody. It's just somebody's way of staying calm, or their body's natural reaction.
Yeah.
So it's you're trying to, actually, that's not, I guess it's really, if I'm understanding this right, you're just trying to let them know, kind of based on the situation where you're at, and not to necessarily make any assumptions. And that's why you use that phrase for the most part.
I use this terminology because I've actually had people say to me that my son doesn't look like he has autism. They'll actually be really candid and say, "Really? Your son looks normal to me." I do realize that some people might take offense with the term high functioning, but for me, my intention is really just to let people know that he does have autism and that autism doesn't have a specific sort of look. And as I mentioned earlier, that he has less challenges cognitively.
Like, when somebody replies when someone replies in that way, with a phrase like that, that shocks you, is how do you handle that?
The first time someone said that to me, I was in a bit of shock, but it has been said to me quite a few times now, so I'm a little more used to hearing it, and now I have a better idea of what to say. I usually try and explain that autism doesn't have a specific sort of look, and that it's a disability due to differences in the brain that affects how that person may think and behave. I tend to go a little deeper by saying what my son has challenges with, because I think providing people with examples helps them understand it more. I do make it a point to clarify that not all people with autism have the same traits, because it is a spectrum disorder that includes a large number of symptoms, of which a person can have any number of. It's more that, do they have enough of these symptoms such that it impacts their daily life?
How many, and so I'd be curious, when the people that you've told this to, how many of them have tried to, I don't know, fix your child with ideas or remedies or something like that. Does that come out at some point?
Yeah, sometimes people will try and offer me solutions and give advice. I think people mean well, but often they have no idea what they're talking about. One person said that I should take my son to a naturopath, and then someone else said that I should make sure there's no food coloring in anything he eats. But probably the worst advice I ever received was that if I took my son to yoga, it would help him calm down. If you've ever met my son, you would know that there's no way that this child could do a yoga class. He'd be running around and disrupting the entire class. There are therapies that exist that can possibly help your child, but autism and ADHD can't be fixed. They're both lifelong conditions.
People usually talk about diet. I remember someone said to me that they don't believe in medication and that children should just be allowed to run around outside and play and then just get out their energy that way. Spoken like a true person that doesn't have a kid with ADHD.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, because like they just
I
wake up the
know.
next day and they just
Mhm.
do it again. Like it's
Yep.
like it's
Yep.
it's gonna go on,
And they just
until they,
and like you or I, we just go. Like it's a lightning bolt. We just wake up and we're going. That's right. We haven't stopped.
yeah.
That's where I get jealous of my wife because it's like she will sit down, have her coffee, and I'm like, I can't do that. I have made the bed, I have emptied the dishwasher, I've started laundry, I've taken a shower. I just go. So yeah, I can understand that. My son's kind of the same way. So it's humorous. Is yours the same thing too?
Um, yeah, yeah, sort of. Yeah, I would say that once he wakes up, he just pops out of bed, like just explodes out of bed, and he's just going, going, going. We've never had that kid that like wakes up kind of groggy and it's hard to get them up. He's
Yeah.
basically the opposite of that. Like even
Yeah.
if let's just say he was sleeping and I woke him up, he would just be like, "I'm up," and he'll just
Yeah.
get up.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I can't relate to those families that say like, "Oh, it's really hard to get mine up in the morning and this and that." No, we don't have that problem.
I laugh. The joke I have is that I don't need coffee and I don't drink it. So he's probably the same. I'm assuming he's probably the same thing. It's like we
Yeah.
just um
Here is a 20-second kindness break.
Mackenzie, what is one kind thing that you can do for somebody who is new to your class?
Show them around.
Owen, if you see someone is having a hard time, what is one action that you can do to help them?
Take the time to listen to them.
Hi, this is Siobhan from the Love and Kindness Project Foundation. Check out loveandkindnessproject.org and find other ways to carry out kind acts or start a kindness project of your own.
How have you ever had anyone declare to you when you tell them that they don't know how to respond?
Yeah. Like I think maybe just once, like one person said, "Oh, I don't know what to say." Like those were their words.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that typically when I think back to all the things that people have said to me, I think the most typical response that I get is when people feel like they need to somehow make you feel better. And
Mm,
what they do is they say something like, "Oh, I know someone whose child has autism," or, "Oh
yeah.
yeah, my son has like someone with autism in his class." Like, you know, because they don't know what to say. So they're trying to find something to say where they can, where it seems like they're empathizing with you,
Yeah.
but they can't really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
What do you want to hear people say when you disclose?
you know, um, recently, I was at a family gathering and I saw someone there, hadn't seen in a long time. She became a clinical counselor.
Mm,
And when I told her, I said, "Oh, by the way, I found out that, my son has ADHD and autism." And she kind of looked at me very kindly and she basically said, um, "Oh," she goes, and how are things? Like, how are things going?" And I actually really like that
mm,
because it wasn't judgmental where she was trying to like empathize with me or try to make me feel better. She was just basically asking like, yeah, oh, okay. Like, so how is it going for you? Like, how are things? And she's letting me dictate whether I say like,
Yeah.
it's, it's really hard or it's going well. Like she's giving me the option.
Yeah.
Instead of like, sometimes I feel like people's responses are typically leaning towards like, oh, I'm sorry for you. Like, poor you. It must be hard. Yeah.
Yeah. I've gotten the sorries before.
Yeah,
I
me
had
too.
yeah, I'm just like, what are you sorry for? But it's because it's interesting with us because since we did get the diagnosis and all that, I was excited. And it's like, yay, I've got something. I've got, we've got it figured out, and we're not, we're at least we have this definition that we've been wondering about for 9 years, or 5 additional years rather. But I think the last question I want to ask you is, tell me about your son.
Oh, okay. Well, he's very happy, outgoing, and he loves talking to people. He's quick thinking, and surprisingly, he is a strong self-advocate. If he feels like he's been treated unfairly, he will tell the person and expect some sort of resolution. It doesn't matter if it's an adult or a child. If nothing gets resolved or if he's ignored, he will go to the next person in the chain of command and voice his concerns. And he will continue to do this until it gets resolved. This surprises us because most kids would be nervous talking to adults, yet these are the things that he has been doing at school. When I think of my son, the image that comes to my mind is a bright sunshine. He's happy, bright, and a very loving person. And a sun kind of encapsulates all of that to me. He does have his challenges. His major challenge is social. Making friends has been really tough for him. He has difficulty recognizing social cues and responding in ways that people would usually expect. We have him in social skills programs to try and help with this. Actually, it's pretty funny. We've put him in many different extracurricular activities over the years to try and figure out what he likes to do. He's always had a good attitude about trying new things, but recently he told me, do not sign me up for anything that has a ball. If it has a ball in it, I don't want to do it. I was surprised because we had him try indoor hockey and soccer. I've watched him in both and I thought he did pretty well, yet he knew he just didn't want to do them anymore. And that's probably because it requires teamwork, which is not his forte. He wants to be the leader and in control of all play activities. And this is one of the reasons it's really hard for him to build friendships.
That's really cool. Thank you for telling me about him. Because he sounds just awesome.
Yeah, some days, on the good days, it's pretty awesome. On the not so good days, it's very taxing.
Yes, I totally understand that piece of it completely. I trust me, I do.
But one thing I have to say is that I would never change him because I love, despite all his challenges, I just love the way that he's different. I love that about him. I love his originality and his intelligence and his quirkiness and just the way his thought process works. It's very different. He's very solutions oriented, and I find that oftentimes his solutions are quite ingenious and not ones that I would come up with in that way. It's because of the way that his brain works. I love that.
Is there anything else that you want to add or say?
I think it's really important for us to educate people about autism and ADHD when people ask questions. Even if they don't really seem that interested, it's better for them to know because there's more and more kids getting diagnosed. And the more that people learn about it, the better.
Cool. Well, thank you, Mary. Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for sharing just such amazing answers. And I really appreciate it. And I hope that this can help, break down some barriers and some stigmas, and somebody who's listening to this who doesn't know now has another point of view to consider.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Here is a 20-second kindness break.
Mackenzie, what is one kind thing that you can do for somebody who is new to your class?
Show them around.
Owen, if you see someone is having a hard time, what is one action that you can do to help them?
Take the time to listen to them.
Hi, this is Siobhan from the Love and Kindness Project Foundation. Check out loveandkindnessproject.org and find other ways to carry out kind acts or start a kindness project of your own.
Tana is guest number 2.
Hi, my name is Tana. I'm the mother of 3 beautiful boys who are all ADHD, and my middle guy is also autistic. We started our journey through our neurodiverse world about 6 years ago. As a member of the 60 Scoop, I've been seeking and learning my heritage. I'm grateful to be learning and sharing that knowledge with my kids. Music and story have always been grounding for me, and I find it to be a great tool to connect with my kids as well. As I walked the path to find supports for my kids, I found areas that needed to be addressed. It's ignited a passion in me that I'm not only to help my kids, but to make this journey easier for other parents. Thanks to the support from Facebook groups, I've realized that I wasn't alone. But on the same note, I was also saddened to realize that I am not alone. There's so many parents out there in the same situation. To get our kids' needs met, it should not be such a struggle. And I find myself in a community with other parents that want to share this same voice. I'm excited for the next steps that I can take to help bring to the kids in BC.
When you tell someone your child has a disability, do you use the specific terminology? Do you say disability, or does it depend on the situation?
Typically, I call it like ADHD or ASD. I try and read the faces of the people to see if they have any knowledge of the terms. And if they have a question mark on their head, I'll go a little bit deeper to offer an explanation. Or to see if they have any interest in their faces. Then I'll engage a little bit more on that conversation.
What do you do when someone replies in a way that shocks you?
I don't think I'm easily shocked. The most shocking moments I had were actually by closer family and friends. I think their initial reactions were maybe based on like a fear and a denial, as if acknowledging it, the ADHD or the ASD, that it was meant like as something wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
But I find most people are not educated in the special needs and say things that are offensive because they're naive and just lack of understanding. I take it as an opportunity to educate them and let them know if they seem open to receiving.
What are the responses that you've received then?
Like the ones that were most off-putting, or
Yeah.
like
Sure.
so,
Like, I mean, you could, if there's a range, there's a range. Not everybody, there's, I again, like, us knowing each other, and finding out, and I will do this and tell people, but it's like, oh, your child has ADHD. Oh, that's so awesome, because I am too. Or like, oh, hey, your child's autistic. That is so cool. I want to know about, whatever they're working on or something like that. Like, tell me about your child. Not everybody replies like me, because I'm just weird like that. But what are the typical responses that you do get?
sometimes people are a little bit more engaged. They'll like ask a question. They're like, what does that mean? How does that present? Some people just kind of like skim over it and ignore that it's anything. There's a lack of acknowledgement. And I feel like that is usually from like a lack of education and a lack of understanding. They just rather not acknowledge.
Does that off-put you when they don't want to acknowledge?
Not necessarily.
No?
I do try to offer a little bit of information to see if there's a little bit more of a bite, because I do like to pass on the education and the awareness of ADHD and ASD and how present it is in our world. I do find in the more discussions I'm having, the more common it is. So I find other parents that are saying, oh yeah, my son or my daughter have ADHD, or they were just recently diagnosed, or we're getting assessments for this. It just, the commonality of it is so much greater at this point.
I should just clarify that the acronym ASD, for those that don't know, it's shorthand for autism spectrum disorder. That's all it is. How many people have you had try to fix your child with ideas or remedies, or try this natural product? Oh, you must have tried ginseng, will clear that up.
I haven't had that many people offering natural kind of things. I found, let's see here, there was people in the school system that were first trying to offer a fix of the medication. And that is completely a personal choice. I decided that it was probably better for my kids after doing some research and investigating the science behind it. I felt that the medication was important. I found it off-putting at the beginning. But like I said, I spent quite some time educating myself on ADHD and its effects and how it works and the things that are beneficial. A lot of, I think, other advice or fixes may have been suggested was like a tough love kind of thing. And I, in my research again, was I was like, that's not the answer.
Yeah.
Expecting this kind of brain to conform to other people's expectations, it's not fair. It's not fair to that brain. And it's frustrating as you putting the expectation. Like it's not fair on either side.
Yeah.
And if people would educate themselves, they would realize that maybe it's just a different approach to get the response that you're looking for.
Have you ever had anybody declare that they don't know how to respond?
They haven't actually said they don't know how to respond. I think when they don't know how to respond, they usually say oh, I'm so sorry. Kind of like a sad kind of underlying thing. I don't feel it's sad at all. I love the way that my kids think, their energies, the things that they delve into. They have so much passion with it because that's the way their brains work.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. So I don't ever feel like it's something to be sorry about.
What do you want people to know about your child, your kids? Not just one child, but, what do you want people to know about them?
Oh, just kind of like how amazing they are. They're just like every other kid. They just kind of want to fit in and belong and be accepted. They want to share their passions, maybe on a grander scale. Their appreciation and lust for the things that they love is like so outstanding. I just think, I don't know, about my kids. Maybe if you're feeling a little frustrated with one of my kids, to take a step back and think about how you could approach it differently. That's something that's a piece of advice that I give about my kids. If you're not getting what you're looking for, then take a step back for a second and reevaluate your approach.
Yeah.
Because I'm in control of how I interact, not how somebody's going to respond to me.
No, and both of us, we have the lived experience of raising our kids, and we know what works. but other people who don't have that lived experience will just sit there and they won't have the same considerations that we do. They don't. And it's unfortunate because kids will be given that label of, oh, they're a bad kid because they're not listening. Well, maybe if they hadn't been put in that situation and that person had done some forethought into what the possibilities are of something going on, maybe it would have been different. And it goes for a question, goes for when you're going out. It's something where it's not an incredibly difficult thing to do for some of us to just it's not putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. It's just thinking ahead of other possibilities half the time. And from that theory of mind perspective, where, someone can't place themselves in somebody else's shoes to understand that, that's why I wanted to phrase it that way, because not everybody can place themselves in there. I look at my own son and I know he can't. It's really kind of funny a lot of the times.
It's funny because when you're talking about how placing yourself in somebody else's shoes, I have post-concussion syndrome from being in a couple of vehicle accidents. And I think that has offered me a lot more compassion for my kids when, as I was as post-concussion, I lose focus and I get distracted and I forget things. So I created my own systems to kind of work through it. And I find incorporating some of those systems into my kids' daily lives is beneficial for them as well. I don't know if I would have had the same level of patience or compassion had I not had my experience either, to be honest. Yeah. I think that I can be very
focused
and maybe narrow-minded at times.
Yeah.
Maybe, but I think I'm actually very open-minded in a lot of things.
I like to think that for myself as well, but quite honestly, I've had more than a fair share of people tell me that my head's located somewhere behind me. And we'll keep it there. Okay, so the last question is, what do you want people to say to you when you disclose these things and you tell them about it?
I think acknowledging, first of all, what they've heard is a good response. Like with either like a question or a validation of their level of understanding would be good. And if they don't have it, like if they don't understand at all what ADHD or ASD means or neurodiverse, all of that, if they don't understand some of the terminology, just simply ask a question. Because getting any knowledge or awareness for yourself is good, and being able to share it and pass it on is even better.
Yeah.
So I think that goes back to the being open-minded.
Cool. I love that. And now for guest number 3, Jeff. And my guest on this segment of the show is Jeff Barshawa. And Jeff, could you give the audience just a little intro about yourself?
Awesome. Well, Mark, it's great to be back on with you and to be on your show. I am a curator of connections. I am a full-time professional networker, and basically I spend my days helping businesses build communities that bring them raving fans.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And Jeff is going to be a future guest on the podcast, so there will be more for that later on. Let's start off with the first question. When you tell someone that your child has a disability, do you use that specific terminology? Do you say disability? Does it depend on the situation? And spoiler alert, I know that you are not a fan of the word disability.
Yes. So it's interesting. I think both of my sons have inherited some of their dad's unique characteristics. I like to focus on, and you had a great word last time we talked. I think it was parent ability-based
Strength,
parenting.
strengths-based parenting. Yeah.
Strengths, yeah. And I honestly, we talk a lot about coping mechanisms. When I have to tell somebody about, I try to avoid telling people about my kids. I try to teach my kids more of the coping mechanisms so that they can self-regulate and they can help others. But rarely do we focus on the word disability, because I think that implies that everybody else is normal. And yes, I know there's some instances
Mm,
where you do have a handicap. If you um need to change gears, my boys both have OCD, they don't change gears well. They need, hey, in 10 minutes we're going to do this, or in 15 minutes we're going to do this.
yeah.
Don't spring surprises on them, because they don't like it.
Yeah. Does that go for positive and negative surprises? Negative, obviously, but positive ones?
um they just don't like surprises, and
Gotcha.
that's, we've kind of adopted the obviously you're not going to tell them what they're getting for their birthday or something, but
Mm,
for the most part we tell them, good, bad, or otherwise, hey, today here's what's going on. We over communicate, and that just keeps them very regulated. So
yeah.
it's, if we don't communicate, we all pay the price for it.
Yep. That was one of the big factors that we learned with our son as we were raising him and trying to understand that concept of front loading is just the biggest thing that no one ever tells you about until you've kind of discovered it. And it's such a huge, yeah, I can't understate or overstate how important that technique actually is. Um, what do you do when someone replies in a way that shocks you? Like, I mean, I know you and I mean, we've talked before about, the word disability and how you've explained it. And I happen to like one thing that you say about, implying that everybody else is quote unquote normal, and there's a difference, right?
Yeah.
It's very much like myself and the word, what is it? Accessibility and accommodation, right? I don't like the word accommodation because it implies that I'm trying to get to, like, what am I? I'm not going to a hotel.
Yeah.
It's not like that. But when you get that reply back from someone who says, whatever it is, how does, how do you reply to that person? What does that make you feel? Does it make you second guess things?
I think really truly it's rare. And part of it is, again, I prepare people, and I usually lead with, like, their father. So if somebody insults my kids, they know they're insulting me. It rarely comes up. I do get the odd, my least favorite phrase is, oh, they seem so normal. Take that back, it's like,
Yeah.
and I'm just going to say, your kids are underwhelming. If you want to insult my kids, I'll insult yours. But usually most of the reactions we've had are sort of disbelief or surprise,
Mm,
very little judgment so far, other than I do hear a lot, oh, they're high functioning. And
mm,
that particular phrase I don't love, because it's rude to the people who may function differently.
yeah.
I know, I've got a couple of kids that are in my world that are nonverbal, and people call them low functioning. And I'm like, they're smart
Not the
kids.
case. Yeah, they're smart kids.
You're
Hmm.
just too damn lazy to get down to their level and figure out
Yeah.
what their strengths are. And I actually helped one mom. She spent a lot of time being told all of the deficits her son has, and just by hanging out with him, and I see him at school drop off and pick up,
Mm.
I made a comment and I said, wow, he's really strong at this. And she was like, oh my God, nobody's ever told me that.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking for the positive. And if somebody's truly, truly negative, if they're a healthcare worker or they're getting in between my kids getting help they need, they're going to be bulldozed. One way or another, they're going to help the way we need them to help us.
Yeah.
If they're just a random person, their opinion doesn't matter to me, and moving on, right?
Yeah.
But my 10-year-old, he'll tell you exactly what's wrong with you if you tell him what's wrong with him. So
good on him. I like him.
they've been
I like him a lot.
forewarned, Mark. And we do a lot of role playing too, just so that they're prepared for it.
That's good. Well, and like, I mean, the thing that you were talking about over communicating, I mean, we do the exact same thing. And that role playing part of it is something I don't think my wife and I have really done that piece too much. But, we talk about these things and then we try to do kind of a debrief after something's gone wrong, like especially after last night, where I was asking my son, how does he feel when, like, he didn't want anybody upstairs near the bedroom because he didn't want his bed messed up. And my daughter had a friend of hers over. And so he's getting very territorial, very angry, very worked up. And it's just like, how do you that's something you can't really deal with in the moment. But, this morning I woke up and I'm like, how did it feel last night? Did your brain feel hot? Did it feel like you had any control at all? Where do you think there was an opportunity at some point to stop and rethink things? Because he sure as heck wasn't listening to me or my wife. And so, you have to go, you talk through those things and try to figure them out and just try to say, well, let's try this next time and I'll help cue you if you need me to do it or something like that. Just be a guide as much as you can.
The good thing is, I spent most of my childhood trying to figure out how to fit in. So I can recognize it faster in my kids. And that's the thing, when somebody's unregulated or, in that moment, that is not the time to course correct. If somebody's lid has been flipped, you're not going to do anything to bring them back to course. But if you share techniques and things up front, and I'm really working on, and this is never perfect, we're not going to ever solve it, but I try to anticipate, okay, here's what we're going to run into, here's what might trigger you, are you ready?
We've got a similar routine with our kids, with both of them as well. How many people have tried to quote unquote fix, air quotes, I'm doing the air quotes, of course you can't see that in the podcast, but how many with ideas or remedies, or have you tried this herbal supplement? Oh, this could, this will help do such and such.
Pretty much, it's everybody's got that. Here's some free parenting advice because worked on my kids, so take it and apply it to your kid. A lot of people have offered, and I appreciate, some people come from a place of caring and they just want to help. Other people, it's genuinely a place of ignorance, and I know they don't mean anything by it, they just don't know any better. I like educating those people and helping them see the path they're stepping down. And then there's some people who just, they know everything and they want everybody to know how smart they are. I let them argue with my 10-year-old and they walk away educated, knowing that he was clearly smarter than them. So I enjoy those.
I do. I increasingly enjoy it a lot, I have to say. On the free parenting advice thing, the question that came up into my brain is that do you find that there's a difference between the parents that don't have a child that is, I don't know, that is ADHD or dyslexic or what have you, versus the ones that do have that? Do you find a difference in the type of advice that you hear, or the range?
I've never really pondered it until you shared your questions with me. Interestingly, the people with kids that have special needs tend to share things from an experience point of view. Hey, Mark, here's what I did. Here's what worked for my child. Whereas people with neurotypical kids, and my least favorite is grandparents. The grandparents tend to give you the here's what you should do advice. It's but most of the advice we get tends to be from people with neurotypical kids.
Yeah.
And what works for a neurotypical kid, oh, do this or do that, doesn't work for my kids didn't get the memo. Here's how you should behave. They didn't read the book on it.
None of us got the memo. None of us got it, I tell you.
and our instruction manual was lost when they came to us. So, we just kind of, we're pretty smart parents, and my wife gets a lot of credit. This works, do more of that. That causes screaming, do less of that. It's we're pretty good at, there's only a handful of things that trigger our kids to the point where they're really difficult to have around. And most of those things we can see coming a mile away. Kids that are hungry, kids that are thirsty, kids that are tired, they're less regulated. And spoiler alert, that applies to all kids.
Yeah.
So we make sure our kids, have naps if they need it. We make sure they get sleep at night. We make sure there's always, my wife is the rock star of snacks, and, there's always snacks and beverages. She never leaves it to chance. You go out to a day at the zoo and, hopefully they'll have water there. Well, what if they don't?
Yeah. Have you ever had anyone declare to you that they don't know how to respond?
We had one lady who suggested that we should drug our child, having a little freak out on an airplane because
that's bad.
Spoiler alert, the flight was delayed by 4 hours, and they thought, let's have the people sit in the tarmac in the sun. He was hot, he was thirsty, he was hungry, and she suggested medication. I suggested that I'd like to put my foot up her backside. We agreed to disagree. So, it's the reality is I see myself as a giant shield around my kids, and whatever abuse I need to take to make sure they get what they need. We rarely get denied twice. So I can be persuasive when I have to be. And, I've learned to advocate for them because, a lot of parenting is, people are worried about what other people think or what other people are going to say about their kids. All I care about is, are my kids happy and healthy?
Yeah.
So if they need food, they get food. If they need water, they get water. If they need a quiet space, there's a quiet space.
What do you want people to know about your kids?
I think the biggest thing I would say is that there's this perception that, low functioning, high functioning, this is actually a fun fact, but a vast majority of accountants and engineers somehow fit on the spectrum because they're that detail oriented, they're introverted. Like there's a lot of misconceptions. You could be very, very, very introverted, you could be on the spectrum, and you can appear to the outside world to be very intelligent. But some of the quirks that you might see, like I get called aloof, indifferent. I don't care about small talk. So I think that's the big thing, is recognize when you're being annoying, because, what might be normal to you might be abnormal and annoying to someone else.
What do you want people to say to you when you disclose?
I think, I'm a naturally curious person, so I ask questions. So when people, when I share, and like I said, I always lead with my diagnosis. I'm more open about it. I'm okay if people ask me questions. So I'd rather they ask questions than go, oh, I understand. No, you don't. So I think I'd like it if people were a little bit more open to, because people ask me questions and then they shut it down because they get uncomfortable. And to me, it's, again, we're all laboring under this assumption that there's this narrow range of average. The world's way more interesting, having people that are different. A friend of mine's writing a book called Welcome to the Spectrum. And I can't wait to see that published, because I think people will realize that, we're not difficult to make your life difficult. Sometimes we're having trouble figuring out how to deal with the other person.
Yeah. And I think that's any other, like before my diagnosis, I know that I always had trouble trying to figure out how to deal with other people too. Yeah. Now I have my diagnosis and I understand perfectly why that was. Yeah. But every other person, sort of goes through that too. So my last question, and I'm going to put you on the spot for this one because it just came into my brain. But one of our sponsors is a group called the Love and Kindness Project Foundation. And their motto is basically, what's one thing that you can think, speak, or act kindly, whether to yourself or somebody else. So I'm wondering if you have a kindness tip that you can share.
I would say my kindness tip would be, when you feel ready to give somebody advice, take a deep breath and realize that maybe you don't know exactly what's going on. So it's just a little bit of, I give people grace so that they give it to me. So I would encourage people, just number one, take a deep breath, give yourself some grace. Nobody's regulated all the time. Nobody is perfect all the time. But the magic is the grace you extend to yourself. That's not carte blanche to be a jerk, but if you give yourself grace when you slip up and then you say, I'm going to try to be better tomorrow or later today, that magically filters into the people you connect with, because they'll give you grace back. And it's fun because they'll start to give themselves grace. So just by being kind, we can make the world a better place.
I like that a lot. I happen to wholeheartedly agree with that too.
And my bonus tip would be, if you see a kid having a tantrum, that is not the time to offer advice.
No.
The parent's not going to listen. The kid's not going to listen. You're getting in the middle of something. Literally, there's a gear switched in the brain. Nobody's going to benefit by your feedback or involvement. So just walk away. Make sure everybody's safe.
Offer something to the parent where, maybe you can push their grocery cart or something like that, like something practical, right? Where it gives them a moment or something like that to really help. Because I know you and I have both heard stories about all those kind of situations and things. And Jeff, that was it for the questions. And thank you very much for sharing your insight, coming on and sharing this, because I know it's going to help a lot of people, and I really appreciate your time.
Well, Mark, it was a real pleasure, and I love the work you're doing, because I think the more people understand differences, neurodiversity, I think the easier it is for us all to get along and to thrive and grow. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to our show.
If you're hearing this message, you've reached the end of the episode, and for that, I want to say thank you. I hope you have enjoyed what you've heard and are walking away with newfound knowledge.
We are the ADHD family.
See you soon for a new episode. I have 3 things to ask of you. Number 1, if you have any comments, questions, or guest ideas, please leave a comment on the Facebook page. Number 2, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps people find us. And number 3, if you want to be a guest on the show or know someone who would make a great guest, contact me through our Facebook page. This podcast is open to everyone. You don't need to be an expert, just passionate and want to see change. The opinions expressed by the host and guest are not associated with any employer or organization unless otherwise stated. Any medical information on this site and podcast is provided as an information resource only and is not to be used or relied on for any diagnostic or treatment purposes. This information does not create any patient-physician relationship and should not be used as a substitute for a professional diagnosis and treatment. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any healthcare decisions or guidance about a specific medical condition. The show, host, and its guests expressly disclaim responsibility and shall have no liability for any damages, loss, injury, or liability whatsoever suffered as a result of your reliance on the information contained in this site or show. By visiting this site and listening to this show, you agree to the terms and conditions, which may from time to time change or be supplemented by the show host.